Hey, this is John Young. This is part 2 of a 3-part series where we're talking about figuring out your rates for 2023. This is a topic we've hit before, and we're going to update it with this little series. Part 1, you can check that out. We'll put the links in the description of this video. But part 1 is basically talking about why you should be thinking about your rates and the value of your time. Part 2, ta-da, you're here. And part 3 is going to be looking at how in your market you kind of figure out what your market can sustain when it comes to a number of events you want to do versus the rates that it's going to take to achieve that level within your market, which isn't the same. There's where your not in my backyard really kicks in, and we're going to dig into that in number 3 of this 3-part series. So for this one, we're going to get into numbers, and this is going to be looking at a lot of numbers. So if you're not a numbers person, you probably shouldn't be in business first off, or you need to hire someone to do this and figure it out for you, so that way you're good to go. But we're going to dive into that right now, so let's just get into that. First thing we want to do is we want to kind of calculate what it's going to take for you to run a business, and this is a very common, if you take a look at, let's see, right over here. If you take a look at that, you're going to be seeing kind of some of the common breakdowns for expenses for your business. And we're going to go through those a little bit. I'm going to be changing some as we go through, because some I've changed already and some are going to need to be changed as we continue on. First off, we want to look at the salary of the owner. And I have this, both the labor of the owner doing these shows and the profit. And what I mean by that is that a business, if it's out there and functioning, it should be making somewhere between a 20 to basically a third, 20% to about 33% profit on every dollar that is made should go towards the business. Then about a third of it should go towards labor, roughly, and then a third should be the other expenses. So that's what we're going to be looking at here in this. So that $40,000 is for the business. In this case, it's the wages and such for the owner as a single op type of a person. That's what we'll talk about that right in this area. Then continuing on down. Renting or leasing of space. Now, this was we had a much lower number a few years ago. 500 probably doesn't touch this. If you need to rent a storage unit, yeah, you're probably looking at around that price. If you need to get a better quality place, or if you're doing an office, this number could be 5 times that for even just a small space. We wanted to put something in there as a single op. Many of you don't have space to store, so you rent a secure storage facility, a space in a secure storage building. I get that. And those can range from $150 a month up to around $400 or $500 a month. Maybe some in some areas will be higher. I wanted a number. We went with 500. Advertising promotion, that could be things like going to bridal shows, getting some things there. It could be putting an ad in a local bridal flyer, whatever. I wanted to have something, so we put $1,000 there, budgeting for the year. We've got our website costs, your website, your domain name costs, your plugins costs. If you're going to be doing some things, there's going to be some tools that you're going to be using. They're going to have some expenses, so you're seeing that we put that $2,000 there. Continuing on, heat, light, power, those different things. Yes, if you're at home and you have a home-based business, there's going to be parts of that will be allotted towards your business if you're taking a home business deduction. If you're having to rent a space, many times the rent of the space is one thing, and then the electric and such are above that. That's what I'm kind of assuming here, is that you're going to be doing one or the other, so that you can allocate about $200 a month of your electric costs and your heat costs, whatever, to your business. Cell phone, internet. If you've got internet and cell phones are going to be about $50 a month, and your internet is going to be somewhere between near that $100 a month. So we figure $200 is going to be a safe number per month on that. Postage, printing, business cards. If you do much of that, it's going to be somewhere between $100 and $200 a month, or $200 a year. So I just put that in as a yearly number. And these again are all yearly numbers that we're looking at right here. I'm just going to see if I can scroll down here. Let's see where we're at. We're at our professional fees. This is way low, no matter what. If you have to talk to an attorney to get a contract reviewed, you're going to be paying more than that. If you're going to have an accountant do your books, it's probably going to be more than that. This is kind of a starting point. If you've got a very simple taxes, your accountant may only charge you $200. Most likely, you're going to be way higher than that. Educational things, membership things, and maybe you're a supporter of DJ and TV, maybe you're a member of the different trainings that are out there. Putting a $1,500 a year into your training, buying books, buying materials is not even close to covering it for most DJs who are really trying to grow their business and grow themselves. But it's a number a little over $100 a month. Mileage. The mileage rate right now is 62.5 cents a mile. If you're driving roughly 2,000 miles a year for your business, that would be roughly $1,250 a year in potential travel expenses. And then if you're going to be flying, travel expense, that was mileage above, and travel expenses, if you're going to be, airfare, hotel, things such as that, for your different things like DJ conventions, if you're going to that. There's DJ meetups going on all over right now. So if you're going to be traveling, and hotel costs and food for those things, allocating about $2,500 a year would get you to one or two each year, which is a great thing to an investment in yourself and your business. Music services, somewhere between $15 and $100 a month. I went 50, and I think that's somewhat a legitimate for most DJs expense, $600 a year. If you're going to be purchasing gear and upgrading, you're going to be spending money each and every year. In this budget, I put together about $5,000 towards improving your gear, and maybe this year you're doing your top speakers, next year you're doing your subs, next year you're doing your controller, whatever it is. You can space things out and do things instead of having everything die on you the same year if you are allocating it and putting it into your budget. Then there are going to be miscellaneous expenses, an extension cord you drove over and ruined, whatever. There's going to be miscellaneous things. So we put in $500 for that. So the total from everything for the year is $26,150. Now, if we look back again at our $40,000 and we add that to this, we come up with the total cost of expenses. And again, there's going to be other little things that pop up that we didn't cover. And there's going to be some years there's going to be higher, some years lower. But this is just give us a ballpark. And that's what I'm after right now. So we understand what's going on with our business and aren't like, whoa, it costs $20,000 to run my business. Yes, it does. $61,150. Now, if we take that into thirds, like I was kind of talking about, third is a business, roughly a quarter to a third is a business profit. Then you've got labor costs and you've got that. We're not too terribly far off because we got $26,500. We're maybe a little high in expenses. And then if we have the $40,000 that's for labor and the business, it's not too terribly far off if you look at it from this idea that if I'm doing 30 events and if I'm doing putting about 20 hours per event in, that's working at the week with the DJ business and then doing those 30 events. And then if I'm aiming for $30 an hour, that's $18,000 a year for just the labor to do this things that we are doing, which then breaks down to roughly to what, $22,000 would be the, in essence, business profit. So you're roughly $20,000 for the business, $20,000 for your labor, and then 26 and something for the expenses. So that's kind of a ballpark of where we are now. So we're going to take that $61,150 and jump to our next page where we can actually break down and figure out how much we should be charging for each individual show. Okay, so for our little example, we've got our kind of expenses figured out. Now, some of those numbers we just looked at, we're going to be removing when we bring that number over to this form, because this is basically the form kind of breaking things down of what labor costs are going to be and anything that kind of pertains to that. It's going to be somewhat in here as we go through to figure out what our prices should be for our shows. So let's kind of go through. We're going to be looking at 5 different event types. We're going to be doing a wedding. The top one is a wedding where you have an assistant. Then we're doing a wedding by ourselves. Then we have a teen event where you're going to be having an assistant and doing a larger production. And then we're going to have, like, say, a bar, a miscellaneous bar, or a miscellaneous event. We're going to go and look at those. For this example, and it's down a little farther, you can't see it quite yet on the page. We're going to be doing 3 weddings where we have an assistant, 2 weddings without, 1 teen event, and we're going to be averaging 4 events for the bar and the miscellaneous events a month. Now, this could be with a 2-system company would be very comfortable with that, because when you add all those up, that comes up to like almost 100 events a year. And this is an average per month. Now, with a lot of you who do school dances, you're like, yeah, we don't do 12, we don't do one every month. I get that. But maybe during homecoming, you might do 4. And then you have some months you'll do 4 or 5. The idea is that you're going to be accounting for 12 school dances over the course of the year. What we have right here is I want to try to figure out the time and the talent time and the labor involved with it. So for performance, for weddings, the 7-hour 2 hour setup, 2 hours for setup and teardown, travel, allocating 1 hour for travel, and then show prep, getting things loaded, cleaned, ready to go, and then music lists and all those different things. So those items, you add all of those up, you end up with 7, 9, 10, 14 hours basically for the talent or the owner. And I'm using talent and owner kind of together in this, whereas if you were just the DJ for this, instead of having the extra show prep, you probably wouldn't have that. So the DJ would be getting paid based on a 7, 8, 9, 10 hour, in essence, event or day. Now, when it comes to figuring out how much your gear should cost against the price of an event, there's a couple of different rules of thought. Some people like to go and say, hey, if I had to go rent it, this is what it would cost to rent the gear. And that's a legitimate thing in some situations, but in most situations, you're not going to be able to get rental price for your gear that you're going out and using. So what I like to do is basically whatever the cost of the gear is that 5% of the cost of the gear is going to be against that show. So let's say that from our weddings, we use roughly $6,000 worth of gear, which is probably pretty low for most of you. But let's just say that was the number. That means that 5% of that would be then going against every show I did, or roughly $300 would be needing to be made off a show to just cover the cost of gear. So we talked a little bit about gear in the last section. That $5,000, this is where that money would eventually hopefully come from, is in this area. So when we do that, we had that $66,000. We're going to take that $5,000 off the top of that before we bring that number back over here. Now, the number of extra staff here let's just try to get this to scroll. Where we are. Number of extra staff here. The top wedding has an additional, and that school dance had an additional. School dance, you'll see also, I just put in a number of twice these things. If you're doing lighting, that should be that could be $30,000, could be $40,000 worth of gear. But for this example, you see where we did that. Hourly rate. Now, some people like to think they can pay assistants $20 an hour. And if you have like a 13, 14-year-old kid who's helping you, you probably can do that. For most of the time, if you're looking for someone who's dependable, reliable, has a car, can drive, whatever, you're probably looking at roughly $40 an hour, $30 to $40 an hour. So for this, we're going to give that person $40 an hour. That would be for the 7 hours of performance, like at that wedding, the setup and tear down. And then, of course, most are going to want to be compensated for their time with travel. And I know some of you are like, well, I don't get paid to travel when I'm going to work. Why should I get paid for my... You're going to have to take care of people well. If you don't, they're not going to be with you very long. So we're going to use $40 an hour. Talent hours. That talent hours would be, in essence, your pay that you're charging for your being involved with this, which again is that full day's time and that additional 4 hours of prep time. And it should be higher than $50 an hour, but we're going to use the $50 an hour. Then I've got a 10% of the cost of the day, the main labor things, that is going to be the owner's business profit is roughly 10%. We talked a little bit about on the other side that it should be higher than that, but we're just going to go with 10% on this. So what you're seeing right here, the talent hours, is how many hours the talent would have involved with it. And I'm just calculating it based on that single person that you, in essence, are doing this show. So for doing the weddings, you're going to have your 14 hours, whatever it was. But there were 3 weddings, 3 like that. So you're going to have roughly 42 talent hours into those 3 weddings for that month. You're going to have 28 talent hours into 2 weddings that are smaller weddings. You're going to have roughly 9 talent hours, which of course the prep ahead of time was probably way more than that, but for this number. And what those talent hours are going to do is I'm going to use that against our monthly expenses. Now, our monthly expenses from the other side, it was 66. We took off 5,000, and I'm also going to take off the labor, that 40,000 of labor and profit. So it comes down to it came down to whatever it was, and then when we divided it out, we came up to 17. It was 1762.50. So all of those expenses are basically in that ratio right there, and you add those all up, and they come up to 72.63. They've been rounded off, but those would be the monthly expenses divided out amongst that number of shows. So we're going to be doing three of the bigger weddings, 2 of the smaller weddings, and we're going to continue down. So those 3 weddings that have a talent fee, 14 hours at $50 an hour for $700. The staff, that extra person roughly is going to come in there at around $400. Could be less, but I'm going to be generous here because I like to pay my people well, so they stay with me. There's going to be a gear cost of about $300 because, again, that's 5%. And then the expense ratio per wedding is basically we take that amount of money that was there and it comes down to $173 per event. The owner profit on this, on that 10%, if we take these and add our labor up, if they're making 10% on the labor, is roughly $140 per event. And then we can continue over here to our break-even point. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm going to just scroll this over a little farther. Okay, so our break-even point is going to be with no labor at all, as far as from us, none of our pay. It's just going to be the expenses of the day, and it's going to be the labor for the other people that are there, your assistants, and your gear, some bare minimum. In order to just break even, but not make $1 for your time, for that wedding where you had an assistant, you need to be charging $873. If you're going to be doing a wedding by yourself and you just need to cover your expenses, it would be $473. School dance with the assistant, again, a minimum of $1,000. Those 2 small events, the bar and the other, a minimum there of $349. Now, if we add in our talent, the fee that we would pay ourselves for doing what we're going to be doing with these events, the suggested for those weddings would be $1,712. Now, some of you are like, hey, that's really low. Well, that's only paying yourself $50 an hour, and that's only calculating it on $5,000 worth of gear. Some of you have podiums and different things out there that between a podium and a controller is over $5,000, not to mention all the rest of your gear. If you all of a sudden triple your cost of your gear, that number is going to go from $300, it's going to be up to $500 to $1,000, and that's obviously going to change your final number here. So we've got with an assistant, 17 roughly should be the suggested. Without an assistant, just to do it yourself would be roughly around $1,300. And what that would do is if we come over here and add the owner money that can come in from this. So for those 3 events, you'd be making roughly $2,500. You're working those events, obviously. And if you're working all of these events, this is what you would end up making if you could do all of those events and do them all yourself. With assistance, you could make roughly $8,400. The reality is you're probably not going to be able to do them all. You're probably going to be able to do maybe the $2,500 and maybe a couple of these. So your profit isn't going to be, but if you were doing 100 events and this was your breakdown a year, it would get you there. So there's a lot of variables. And what I want to do is I want to come back here to the number of events. And I want to go and change one thing here on it. So let's say we did not do events we didn't have a staff or an assistant with us. We did no weddings. We did 2 weddings without an assistant. And let's say that we did not do any bars. There were no bars in our configuration. And we only did one off event per month. So we do average one anniversary a month or something to that effect. So let's go back down and check and see how that changes our numbers. So where our labor numbers are not going to change per se, it's going to be in the expenses side of things here. So we got a couple of dividing by zeros. That's why that's throwing the error. But now you're going to see that there's a major change in our expenses per event. So now our wedding, those 2 weddings, now we need to be charging $548 to cover the expenses. And then, of course, that's with a school dance and with the bar or the anniversary, because you take this 2 of these plus those ends up with our $1,700, $1,760 monthly expenses. So the fewer events I do, the higher it goes. And now that moves my suggested wedding number up to around $1,700. I'm going to do one more thing. Let's just say I only do weddings. I don't do anything else. I just do the wedding here. Got to dump that. And I'm going to, well, let's just keep that oddball, that one oddball event for the year, because that can happen. So we've got we're doing 2 weddings a year, or 2 weddings, a month, and we're doing 1 oddball event per. Now here's where it gets kind of sticky with this a little bit is that, okay, so my expenses come into roughly $700 per show, and my numbers work that those 2 weddings, to break even, I need to charge $1,000, and I can make things ends meet more comfortably at $1,700. But I also need to be charging $1,100 for that other event, and I need to be able to find 12 of those events at $1,100 or more to be able to make this work. So I've got to find 24 weddings at $1,800, and I need to find 12 at the other side of it. But let's say that I'm only a wedding DJ. I don't do anything other than wedding DJ things. So I'm going to put a 0 there, and then we're going to scoot back over here. We're doing 2 weddings a month. So our 2 weddings a month comes out to that roughly $881 of that wedding is going to be my expenses that are involved with that. That means to break even and not pay myself a dime. If I charge $1,200, I'm not making virtually anything off those shows per se for those 2 weddings a month. That's 24 weddings a year. So think about that. $1,200, and I'm really not making much of anything off those. But if I want to get myself a little bit of a pay and such, I can go and I can charge, again, for those 2 weddings, about $2,000. And I'll be putting in my pocket, in essence, a pay to me of around $1,600. Well, $1,600 times 12 is not a ton of money. It's not a ton of money whatsoever. And it gets to the point of it's like, okay, $400 a week. Am I looking at, maybe should I be doing something else? And that's something that you really have to weigh out, because $1,600 might not be worth your time to be taking on the stress of weddings. It might be something that instead of charging $2,000, you need to be charging $2,500 or $3,000 to make it worth your time to take on the responsibility of weddings. Now, all of this hasn't talked about a couple of big evil things that are off to the side, and that is health insurance. There's nothing there for health insurance. As we get older, there's disability insurance, and a lot of people, Dave Ramsey talks about that long-term care insurance. You need to be thinking about that after you get to a certain age of 60 and such, and some of us are getting to that age. And it doesn't talk about retirement. We haven't put any money away for retirement. I'm hoping that 10% would be going towards that, but that's probably not enough for most of us. So that suggested $2,000 for the 2 weddings a month maybe should be $4,000, so you can do what you need to do. But I'm under the assumption that most people who are watching this are probably part-time DJs. They have a day job or a spouse that has the benefits, so they're not having to cover their life or their health insurance and things. And really what they're doing is trying to break even and make the DJ business pay for itself, and to put money in their pocket that's greater than what they could get by going and working at their local big box store. And if you can do that, yay, great. You've come a long way in this industry, and a lot of people, unfortunately, haven't gotten there with you. But when you do the numbers and sit down and kind of think about it and work your way through, you can really kind of figure out where you should be price-wise. This is video, of course, number 2 in a 3-part series. Video 1 kind of talked a little bit about what kind of value there is of your time and why you should be charging for your time. And then this is 2, and then 3 we'll be talking about, okay, so we know some of our numbers of where we want to be. What can our market sustain? Not every market can handle a lot of people at a certain number. There's only so many events at certain price points available, and we're going to look at that in video number 3 of what are some indicators to kind of tell you about where and how many events and what your potential might be for where you would like to price yourself. So we'll dig into that in part 3 of this 3-part series, and those links, once they all hit, will be down in the description of these videos so you can check all 3 out. This is John Young with the Disc Jockey News. Thanks for watching.